Good evening, everybody. It's just gone 6:30, so I will start. Just to let you know, there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located to the rear of this room, and go downstairs and then meet in the War Memorial Park. Members, please do note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet, and please do switch your phones off or turn them to silent. I'll just check that the webcast has started, and then we will get going with our first item. Lovely. Do I have any apologies for absence or substitutions? I don't believe so. No. Any declarations of interest this evening? None. Perfect. There are no urgent matters to discuss, so that leads us to the first item on the agenda, item 4, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of June. I do have one suggestion for the change to the minutes, but does anyone else have any first? No, perfect. I have been approached by a member of the ICE Users Forum who was concerned about some of the bullet points, well, the first bullet point on page 8, under section 1022, which, having reviewed the webcast, I felt didn't really properly summarise our discussions. So I would like to propose a change to say, mainly reorder it and change the stress a bit, really. Concerns were raised regarding the low response rate of the consultation and whether there was a fair representation and how the council could encourage wider participation and engagement in consultation processes. It was noted that a high number of responses came from users of the ice rink, but it was agreed that all responses were valuable contributions. Is everybody content with that? Happy to agree the minutes? Thank you. Lovely. So that leads us on to item 5, which is a presentation from Hampshire County Council on Hampshire's approach to on-street parking and traffic management. So we have a presentation from Mark Samways from Hampshire County Council, which I believe will take about 20 minutes, and then we will have time for questions afterwards. So please save your questions up. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah. And how does my presentation go on?
At least press the magic button. You're good.
Lovely. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me here this evening. I've put together a few slides to kind of talk around the subject and the County Council's proposals going forward, or how the service will operate. But I appreciate a lot of questions kind of likely to be kind of asked. So certainly we can either I'm happy to either take questions as we go through, or if you like I can complete the presentation and then take some questions there. So just quick introduction. So I'm Mark Samways. I'm the County Council's Highway Manager for Traffic and Safety, and that includes the traffic service, casualty reduction, road safety education, school crossing patrol, and also now the County Council's on-street parking service. Oh. So just a quick summary here of what I'm looking to cover within the presentation this evening. So just give you a little bit of background about the decision that the agency arrangements that we're talking about. Talk about timescales. We'll talk specifically about on-street parking enforcement and the arrangements that we're looking to put in place. We'll talk also about the Traffic Management Agency, technology and the part that that's got to play with the County Council's new service. And then we'll go on to talk about some communications plans, and then finally we'll have some questions. So just by way of giving some kind of background here, the decision to terminate the remaining district traffic and parking agencies was not taken lightly by the County Council. It wasn't a reflection on the way that Basingstoke had run the services. It was just a kind of, a kind of wider decision, and it was about bringing in services back to the County Council that we felt needed to be delivered on a consistent basis, and also where we had a lot of scope to kind of modernise the services. So that was really thinking behind it, and the decision was made formally by our executive member for Highways Operations back on the 10th of March this year. When we talk about the agency agreements, we're talking about two separate agreements. Firstly, we've got the Traffic Management Agency Agreement. So this is the agreement that kind of is based around kind of traffic team at the districts and Basingstoke here, implementing new or amended on-street parking controls. It also includes things like disabled parking bays, residence parking permits, and then there's some other kind of associated bits and pieces such as temporary traffic orders for utility works. The second agreement is the Civil Parking Enforcement Agency Agreement. So this, as the name suggests, it is all about the on-street parking enforcement aspect, but also covers things like the administration of the residence parking zone schemes and issuing of permits, that side of things. So with notice having been issued to the Borough Council to terminate the agencies, that means that both functions will return to the County Council as of the 1st of April 23. So functions such as off-street parking, completely unaffected by this, because obviously, majority of car parks are owned and managed by the Borough Council, so this doesn't affect that in any way. And there's also a few other bits and pieces, such as events on the highway, processions, sporting events, that kind of thing. Generally, those are dealt with by the Town Police Clauses Act. And those remain in place because those are actually kind of district and borough council functions. We have terminated agency agreements already in some of the other districts, some of those some years ago, and where we have terminated, particularly the traffic management agency agreements, there has been scope, and some of the districts and boroughs have chosen to continue with a licence arrangement to be able to operate speed indicated devices and speed limit reminder signs. If that was something that the Borough Council wished to pursue, then we can certainly put a licence in place for that one. So moving on, so I just thought I'd kind of summarise on a slide here just really what we're looking to achieve at the County Council and the kind of overarching kind of principles really for the parking service. So I think firstly, and very, very important, is this kind of issue of delivering, or this aim of delivering, the on-street parking service on a full cost recovery basis. Now, collectively over the years, the district delivery model has operated at quite a significant deficit. We've had kind of year-on-year deficits of over £1 million with reported to the County Council. Another key point is to operate the on-street parking service to a consistent standard. So at the moment we have very much a case of varied parking policies, varied kind of approach to enforcement on street, across all of the different district and borough councils. And, you know, that's something that I think, you know, can be deemed to be a bit unfair on the motorists, that, you know, they might have kind of parked in one borough and been dealt with in one way, and then moved to a district, and, you know, the parking arrangements are quite different. So there's that. Removing duplication, you know, naturally results in quite a lot of savings of the service. So at the moment, with the current arrangements, we have individual parking managers for every one of the district and boroughs, other than the areas that we cover ourselves. And we also have different software systems, different back office software, different permit arrangements. Some of them have digital permits, some of them have paper permit systems. Teams of admin staff or notice processing staff dealing with appeals and management of residents' parking permits. And also we want to be fair and transparent, and we have kicked off our when we started our first year of the new service covering Fareham, Gosport, New Forest and Test Valley districts, we have produced an annual parking report that, you know, very clearly shows all of the detail of that service. It shows that the level of income that we've generated, the level of expenditure, numbers of penalty charge notices, numbers of penalty charge notices that were successful through appeals. So we've produced a comprehensive document that, you know, doesn't hide any of the facts. It provides people with all of the information that they need. Another kind of core part of the County Council's parking service is to, as much as possible, get people to self-serve. So, for example, being able to apply for their permits online via the My Permit system. You know, they can do that if they've got particular kind of issues in terms of lack of enforcement or you know, parking issues where they live. Then they can go onto the County Council's web pages and be able to kind of request enforcement or report parking issues, that type of thing. And the other key point is that we deliver the parking enforcement service in partnership with NSL. NSL are, you know, probably the largest parking enforcement parking specialist provider across the UK, so they've got a very strong track record. Just some more slides here, just showing some of the information that we've included within our annual parking report. You can see we've got a section here on financial transparency, showing numbers of penalty charge notices that were issued month by month. This is an extract actually from our first annual parking report, so that kind of explains why we didn't issue any kind of penalty charge notices during the kind of lockdown period when the service first went live. But we do try to, you know, include as much kind of information and statistics, and it's based, you know, on a lot of the kind of questions that we get asked from members of the public. If we receive, you know, requests for information, we've certainly made sure that we've covered that and a lot more information as well within our annual parking report. And you can see here on one of the extracts we've got numbers of penalty charge notices, the kind of total number that were subject to appeal, those that were where the appeal was accepted, those where the appeal was rejected, and, you know, lots more detail there as well. So I've really mentioned that in terms of the frontline delivery of the service, we do this in partnership with NSL. NSL provide that frontline enforcement, so they provide the civil enforcement officers, the vehicles, the equipment, the uniform, you know, all of that side of things. And then they also, within our parking contract, they also deal with our back office notice processing side of things. So that's dealt with very consistently and to county council policies. And then we have our own County Council Parking Services team. So they deal with all formal appeals. So it's what we call from notice to owner stage onwards. The informal appeals dealt with by NSL are very much to, as I say, to the kind of agreed County Council policy, so that's very consistent. And then when it comes across to the County Council, if people, not satisfied with that and want to take the appeal a stage further, then, as I say, that is dealt with by our own parking services team. So they deal with the formal appeals, TPT cases, so that's the Traffic Penalty Tribunal cases, which is the kind of independent adjudication. They deal with contract management, inquiries from members of the public, monitoring of the contract in terms of the various KPIs, key performance indicators, and so on. And just mentioned the KPIs there to monitor performance. So just to kind of touch on KPIs, I won't go through these in too much detail, but just to kind of make you aware that we have a number of key performance indicators where the contractor is monitored. So, for example, accuracy of PCNs, numbers of PCNs cancelled, that type of thing, because we don't want any civil enforcement officer, issuing lots of kind of PCNs for the sake of it if they aren't then, going to be cancelled and they're not, kind of effectively kind of robust PCNs and, not deemed to be fair. I've included this slide just to do with kind of parking myths here because this is something that I think, when we talk about our partnership arrangement with NSL, there does seem to be a lot of, general talk along the lines of the County Council having outsourced this arrangement, which is not the case. As I say, it's very much a kind of partnership arrangement. But, lots of these kind of points here, so, about private contractors having penalty charge notice targets, for the number of those that are issued. That is not the case at all. The legislation does not permit that. Our overall aim is to try and achieve 100% compliance with the restrictions. Obviously, fairly unlikely that we will ever do that, but that really is the aim to it. So the NSL contract is very much based on the County Council buying in enforcement hours, and we have varied that from time to time as needed. The NSL also operate the service, as I mentioned before, to County Council policies and procedures, and these, again, are clear, transparent policies. They're all available on the County Council's web pages. And also within those web pages, we've got record of, as every authority would have, their kind of observation times for specific contraventions. We don't, despite what some people would think, we certainly don't have civil enforcement officers, kind of hiding away and, waiting to kind of pounce on people. With a PCN, it really doesn't work like that, and yourselves will know that anyway. And I think really a lot of the kind of mix-up has come about with regard to companies like NSL being kind of maybe mixed up with some of these kind of very unscrupulous private parking companies who operate on kind of private land or sometimes even supermarket car parks and things. Utilising ANPR cameras and all sorts of things, or even sometimes kind of clamping. And just to go back, and again, we put this section, myth busting, what was included in our annual parking report. So, service modernisation, and again, this is really key to be able to kind of streamline the service and really what the County Council is all about in terms of, you know, modernisation of that service. So I just kind of listed a few bits and pieces here that we've kind of introduced since the service has gone live. So we have, for the 4 districts that we deliver the service directly for, we've got digital permits through the My Permit system. All of the civil enforcement officers wear body-worn cameras, and that's very useful in terms of the kind of aggression that sometimes can you know, that they can experience. I think often, you know, they will, because they don't automatically record things, but if a conversation is getting difficult, getting heated, then they will notify the person that they're going to switch on their body-worn camera. All of our civil enforcement officers have GPS tracking devices. That is especially useful in terms of kind of efficiencies and you know, being able to kind of establish, you know, effective kind of beat patterns and things like that. But it's also very useful to have that evidence in place to be able to, you know, demonstrate to a resident who is adamant that, you know, their road has not had any enforcement, for example, and we can produce the kind of, you know, printouts and statistics there to be able to show, you know, how many times that particular road has been visited, you know, how many PCNs have been issued, how long was spent there, that kind of thing. The service is also built around sustainability. So at the moment we have hybrid vehicles with a contract, and that's partly because of the difficulties of covering a kind of wide area that includes the New Forest. But moving forward, when we expand the service, the plan is to go with totally electric vehicles, and that's a mixture of cars and mopeds. And we also have things like the penalty charge notice wallets, you know, a kind of sustainable material so that we reduce the use of plastic. CEO uniforms are made of recycled plastic bottles. So, you know, we're trying to obviously do what we can, and NSL, because they're a very big you know, service provider, are you know, often coming to us, you know, with extra kind of ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint on that. Mentioned about the kind of self-service systems. Just to the right of this slide here, we've got an extract of the County Council's parking pages. And there are various kind of tiles here where you can apply for a new parking permit, you can pay a PCN, you can report a parking contravention, that type of thing. So, as I say, you know, it is very much kind of built around the self-service system. But then we do also recognise that there will be, you know, proportion of residents that won't have access to the internet, and therefore, you know, we do also have access to these same systems via phone as well. We have, again, with a kind of county-wide service, and, you know, with our current 4-district setup, we are able to kind of bring in additional resource as and when we need it, dealing with things like kind of parking hotspots. So, for example, when we had the lockdown, national kind of lockdowns eased, and we had the kind of big surge of people going to kind of seafront locations, things like that. We then, you know, also had a big surge in parking contraventions, and, you know, people kind of blocking the highway, and we were able to kind of draw on those resources from the kind of quieter areas to kind of supplement that on a, you know, temporary kind of basis. And obviously as well, you know, one of the other key points is that we're not constrained by these kind of borough and district boundaries. At the moment, you know, we know that we have a lot of our kind of districts out there that struggle for resource with regard to civil enforcement officers, and you know, some of them are kind of really having to kind of operate virtually a kind of skeleton enforcement service because they just cannot get civil enforcement staff in place, and find it very difficult to retain them because it is obviously a very difficult job. So again, being able to kind of draw on a wider pool of dedicated on-street enforcement does make a difference. So one of the kind of key bits going forward is to communicate that the changes, make sure that people are aware of these things. I'm sure our colleagues here at the Borough Council are not going to want to be kind of inundated with people, talking about difficulties they might be having in, renewing their residence parking permits, or, reporting kind of issues to do with kind of on-street enforcement once that service comes back to the County Council, and likewise, on the traffic management side as well. So we have been working on a communications plan that we've been sharing with your service leads here. We will be writing also to every one of the residents who lives within a residence parking zone to give them details as to how they will apply for their new residence parking permit once it expires. What we won't be doing is kind of insisting that everybody, has to kind of abandon their current, paper permit from day one, and has to apply for a new digital permit. We had a situation with the other 4 districts where we had a kind of transitional arrangement. Any permit that's been issued by Basingstoke and Dean will remain valid until the expiry of that permit, and we previously have provided a kind of grace period so that people whose permit does expire, soon after we take over the service, are still able to, have a bit of time to be able to kind of renew their permit. We will be issuing press releases, information I think through social media as well. We'll be updating our County Council web pages, and we'll be talking to the Borough Council, who I know have got plans to do the same for their web pages, and to say as well that, although we're taking these functions back, the highway authority functions with the County Council, we will continue to work with Basingstoke and Dean. We need to make sure that if we're doing anything to the kind of on-street service, we don't want that to have an adverse impact in any way on the off-street parking service, and vice versa. I think if we were to be in a situation where we were to kind of maybe look at putting in few kind of isolated kind of pockets of on-street pay and display parking, it makes sense for us to be able to kind of replicate the any kind of nearby off-street charges, that type of thing. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover, and then just really over to you if you had any questions.
Lovely. Councillor Jeans was very quick with her hand up there, so I'll go to you first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting. A couple of questions from me. Will there be a limit on the number of permits per household?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. We will be working with Basingstoke's parking team to kind of identify what the current limits on kind of parking permits are. I mean, obviously, we have to be mindful that we don't want to be kind of selling permits to residents that really have got no opportunity to be able to park there. Not so much, I don't think, in Basingstoke, but certainly other kind of parts of the county. We do have situations where maybe a lot more kind of permits have been issued than that there's actually kind of space for on the ground. So in those cases we're trying to kind of limit the numbers of permits to allow for a little bit kind of visitor permit use as well. But no, I would say that we wouldn't be looking to make significant changes to what the Borough Council already do.
Thank you. And my second question is sort of in 2 parts, really. Well, one of the major issues that we have locally, and my colleague, Councillor Momalaney, and I, we look after the town centre and a couple of surrounding areas. We have major issues with enforcement around schools. And I know that's sort of borough and county-wide. With the new regime, will we see more footfall around schools to help with enforcement? And also, sort of adding on to that, I saw you had online reporting for parking contraventions. Can the general public report online any parking contraventions? Because actually that would make certainly our lives much easier, because we seem to spend many hours a week on parking patrol at schools. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of being able to use the online reporting system, then yes, any member of the public can do that. They will be able to have access to that, as long as they've got access to the internet. I mean, it's obviously not the only way that they can contact us. They can, use your kind of methods, phone call, email, and so on. But we do try and channel even our own kind of county members really as best we can to get them to make members of the public aware of that online reporting system. I should be clear that it doesn't guarantee that kind of NSL will be kind of sending somebody out there within kind of a day or so, because sometimes we do have few residents that maybe will kind of complain about a vehicle parked out there outside their house, and it's been kind of looked at, it's been investigated, but there are no parking controls there, and it's kind of maybe undesirable rather than kind of parking it in contravention. In terms of school enforcement, we do get a lot of demand for that at the moment, and NSL do, again, try and cover that as best they can. We are, as part of the kind of moving traffic enforcement powers, we are trialling a couple of enforcement sites for school keep clear markings. So, again, if there's any kind of specific kind of problem areas, that's the kind of thing we've been working with our colleagues in the school travel planning team for schools that have got an active school travel plan, and maybe engage with our road safety education initiatives, and then if it kind of ticks those boxes going forward, then we may be able to kind of look where they've got a very kind of stubborn parking problem that's not being picked up. Then that might be something that we could look at in the future.
Thank you. I think you'll be hearing from us quite a lot.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you very much for the presentation. I just have a couple of questions as well. The first one is around, particularly in my ward, and it's not uncommon across Basingstoke. We've got older residents, might not be tech savvy. How do they access digital permits? And if they can't, are paper ones still being issued, or can they still apply for paper ones or a copy?
Yeah, again, very good question. We do have, with the My Permit system, there is a phone number that can be contacted. So that, again, the letter that will go out to all residents will provide details of the app, the web page, and also the phone number. So they can go on and activate, for example, a visitor parking permit session with a quick phone call. The question about paper permits, it is the intention really to move away from paper permits, because they are very costly to kind of administer, and that side of things. I wouldn't say 100% that we don't have any paper permits. We try and be very kind of pragmatic with this, and there are a few occasions across the four district and boroughs that we look after at the moment where we do issue just a handful of paper permits, but it tends to be more kind of situations maybe where you've got a member of the public that needs kind of round-the-clock 24-hour care, and you've got maybe a situation where you've got lots of carers kind of coming in, and the digital permit system a little bit kind of tricky in those situations. But on the whole, I would say very few where we've got kind of paper permit systems, and our experience is that people that do kind of operate the My Permit system quite well.
Okay, thank you. So just on that then, is the My Permit system a 24-hour system? So if I was to call up at 11 o'clock at night and I needed to have a visitor permit issued quickly, could that be done?
I think that the thing to remember is that most kind of residence parking zones are only kind of restricted. You only need a kind of permit, normally kind of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m, something like that. So there isn't a need to kind of activate a visitor permit system. But whether there is kind of 24-hour round-the-clock coverage, it's not something that I've personally been asked before. I can certainly check that out and find out. But as I say, I think in practice it wouldn't actually be needed.
It'd be good if you can come back to us though on that. Yeah. Thank you. My second question, it's not so much a question, more of a seeking reassurance. You made the statement about parking hotspots and the ability to drag resource from one quieter area to backfill places where there might be parking hotspots. How's Hampshire County Council going to reassure residents of Basingstoke and Dean, who across every single ward in Basingstoke suffers from parking problems? How are you going to reassure them that there are going to be enough people to cover our borough should, say, Gosport or Fareham or somewhere else in Hampshire have a parking hotspot problem and we're left without?
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear on that, we would never, take away the resource, in huge numbers. I think all we're talking about is, being able to kind of supplement a particular kind of problem area. And sometimes, that can be dealt with by, kind of paying overtime to some staff that would, maybe on a kind of rest day or, working shorter hours that week. In practice, it wouldn't happen. We would never have a situation where, one district is kind of suffering as a result of a, particular kind of event or something going on. Again, I think it's important to, I haven't gone through, detail of the key performance indicators with the contract, but kind of area coverage is a very kind of critical key performance indicator. And, if, NSL, were to do that, under our kind of instruction, well, they wouldn't do that because they would fail their KPIs. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one last one then. Do you set the prices for the parking charges, or is that NSL that set the fees?
No, so in terms of penalty charge notices, that is stipulated under the Traffic Management Act. So there's a kind of upper and a lower tier event, so it's national legislation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So just to run through my list in case I've missed anyone, I've got Councillor Mulleney, Councillor Mackay, Councillor Tuck, and then Councillor Williams. If you think you've waved your hand at me and I've missed you, please wave harder. Councillor Mulleney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Officer, for your questions. My first question is about on-street car park chargings. So we have some proposals to have some car parking charging. Where does it fit in this jigsaw? Like, we will be losing so many parking spaces. Who will be maintaining these ones? That's my first question. The second one is, we were talking about the criteria. What is the criteria for choosing an area for parking, residential parking permit zone or not? Who decides it? And the third question is about houses are, the number of houses in and around town center area are going up and the number of cars are going up. But not the parking spaces. We have the limited roads. So how are you going to address these problems? Thank you.
Thank you. So your first question, you were talking about parking charges. That was on street.
On-street charging. On-street charging points. That's electric car charging points.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So the electric vehicle charging points, the county council's kind of separate team actually looking at that particular project. They have rolled out a couple of trial schemes. I think one of them was in Winchester. One of them was in Eastleigh. I know that they are being monitored. I know that colleagues within the department where I work are having, regular kind of district liaison meetings. I know, I think that the lady, that there's a lady that who attends those meetings from Basingstoke and Dean. So I know that there are, kind of plans in place in terms of kind of, more on-street and off-street EV charge points, but it's not a kind of project that I'm directly involved with. Again, I can certainly take it away and see if I can get an update for you. But I think that the lady actually at the Borough Council that would probably know the most is Emma Gover. Emma Gover. I know that she's been liaising regularly with the County Council with regard to that one. I think your second question was around the residence parking zone criteria. Now, generally, we're not kind of putting in kind of too many residence parking schemes beyond, what we've already got in place. That they are very, very difficult, really, because as soon as you put in a scheme, you tend to then suffer with this kind of problem of displaced parking. So, kind of areas that maybe had a problem before that you've covered with a residence parking zone, you put in a scheme and then all of a sudden, those vehicles don't disappear. They kind of move to, a little bit kind of further away, and then, you have to be careful that you're then kind of creating, more kind of problems, and then, do you consider a further expansion of the residence parking zone? So we tend to find that there's a few kind of new schemes going in at the moment, and that's really kind of across the board, both within the district and borough areas that we look after ourselves, and also the agency areas. But I'm not saying, that we wouldn't put more in future, but we just have to be very mindful of those kind of, knock-on problems. So in terms of, what the kind of current criteria would be, they would only be really considered in an area where you've got kind of commuter or kind of shopper parking really, causing a problem. So normally it would be areas kind of close to kind of town centres, where you've maybe got kind of shop workers that are kind of perhaps kind of parking there to avoid city centre parking charges, maybe near railway stations, that kind of thing, and pretty sure most of those kind of types of areas are already covered. So the other kind of critical point from the County Council's perspective is that schemes must operate on a full cost recovery basis. If they don't operate on a full cost recovery basis, that basically means that, the wider parking account and, the kind of council taxpayer is kind of, in effect, kind of subsidising those schemes where residents are getting a benefit. And I think your third point was around more kind of, parking policy and new development, that type of thing. I think, probably, as much a kind of planning issue there, but, I would say, what we've noticed at the County Council in recent times is that actually we've had a reduction in the numbers of, so for example, the numbers of residence parking permits that are being sold, because I think a lot of the time, with more people working at home, I think that the cost of living and, the cost of driving as well, fuel prices, we're finding that, households that previously may have had perhaps a couple of permits, these days more likely to only have one permit. So, you know, I probably about all I can say on that. But yeah, I do appreciate that, you know, particularly in a town centre location, you know, kind of pressure on parking always, isn't there?
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Sorry, wrong button pressed there. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to understand on a typical day how many NSL enforcement officers we could expect to be deployed in the borough and how that compares to the number typically deployed across the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what we will be starting off with is trying to kind of replicate the level of resource, you know, generally that the districts are, districts and boroughs are you know, currently have, and then kind of building on that. I mean, what we did for Fareham, New Forest and Test Valley is kind of start off with that same level, and we were then actually able to increase that level of enforcement. It's all kind of down to compliance, really. If we find that, you know, that compliance is improving over time in terms of, you know, numbers of penalty charge notices, it's kind of dropping down, then we can ease back a little bit with enforcement. But I think very much, you know, the starting point would be to replicate what the districts and boroughs are doing, possibly a little bit more on top of that. What I'd say is that, you know, we've noticed overall that, you know, with a dedicated on-street parking enforcement team, that we have been issuing more penalty charge notices than the districts and boroughs were able to before. You know, not that that's a good thing, but we're getting a lot of requests from members of the public, you know, to kind of undertake more enforcement than, you know, what was possible under the old kind of district and borough setup.
So are you able to say how many officers you expect to start with in Basingstoke and Deane, please?
I don't have that information to hand. My kind of parking services team leader would have that, but again, you know, kind of happy to come back to you on that. I mean, you've got colleagues here today that would be able to kind of probably advise as to, you know, from the Borough Council as to, you know, the level of resource that you've currently got. But all I would say is it wouldn't be less than you've currently got.
Currently we have a team of 6 CEOs. We're carrying 1 vacancy at the moment. I would predict that on an average time of the day, we've got 2 to 3 officers actively patrolling. But remember, that is covering both on street and off street at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Tuck.
Thank you, Mr. Samways, for your presentation. That was great. Could we have a copy of the KPIs, please? And how frequently are you expecting to report back to us on them?
Thanks. Yeah, I can imagine that we can provide you know, a list of the KPIs. I know that, you know, we haven't. Some parking services contracts have lots and lots of KPIs, but we only have, I think from memory, kind of 4 or 5, something like that. But they are, you know, monitored very strongly. I suppose in terms of reporting back, all of the information will be published in the annual parking report. I don't think it's the County Council's kind of plan to be, you know, kind of reporting back on kind of performance and statistics, because, you know, all of that information will be published on a regular basis.
Okay, I'd be a bit nervous if in the first transition year we waited a full year. It would, I think, probably we'd want better visibility of that, if that would be okay, at least for the initial year.
I think probably, you know, it would be a case of, you know, ongoing dialogue between, you know, the kind of officers at the Borough Council with regard to that. But again, wouldn't be a need to kind of, hide any of the information. I'm sure, that if there's kind of specific information, I don't know that the type of thing that you're kind of thinking about, if it's kind of, numbers of PCNs or kind of, numbers of civil enforcement officers in post, I'm sure that we would be able to provide, some kind of headline figures on that.
Thank you. Do you know if there's a plan to feed back regularly to one of the county council committees on those KPIs and figures?
No, we don't do that at the moment. I mean, it's very much, kind of business as usual activity. I mean, I can tell you that, in the last 12 months, I think we issued 21,000 PCNs across the 4 district areas. I think because our executive member provides a forward within the annual parking report that we would be going through that kind of information with him, but no, I think we have a kind of parking operations board, parking strategy board that we kind of report figures and details to, but like I said, I don't think it's the kind of information that we're being requested to kind of provide as a matter of course, really.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much for a clear presentation. You actually dealt with my main question in replying to Councillor Mackay, because I was concerned about the allocation of hours, because you're buying a contract and then every area will want to know what assumptions been made in relation to the allocation for their area. But the second question I have, perhaps you could clarify the process where you apply for a digital permit. Does that generate a physical permit? And if not, then in which case, how are the enforcement officers to know that a car is properly parked?
Again, another very good question. The civil enforcement officers have a handheld device which links to the My Permit system. One of the interesting points that members of the public have spoken about and been in contact with, again, kind of only in the early days really, was, how are they to know which resident has a permit and which resident doesn't? And, the simple answer is that, that they won't, and it's really not their role to kind of undertake, the kind of enforcement activity for us. The My Permit system, is very kind of clear, very effective. People, can access that system, as I say, either via the kind of app, via the kind of online web page, or via the kind of telephone systems. So, yeah.
I would just make the point, when DVLA moved away from a paper licence, they actually lost a hell of a lot of revenue, and they're still in that situation. So I do think it's something that needs to be considered.
Yeah, I think really the whole point of the virtual permit system, digital permit system, I think it is possible if somebody was, particularly keen to be able to kind of print out, a kind of confirmation email or kind of, something that they wanted to kind of display within the screen. That is possible. It's just it is not necessary, and any vehicle that is kind of parked within a residence parking zone without either having a residence parking zone digital or possibly paper, through the kind of transitional time, or an active visitor kind of session, that they will be identified, by the civil enforcement officers, and PCN would be issued.
Perfect. I do have Councillor Lee, but as he's gone his second turn, I'm going to sneak one of my questions in first. We've talked a little bit about KPIs. Is there a KPI on appeals? And if so, do you know what that target is? Because that was one of the things that flagged in your presentation that was quite concerning, that of a number of appeals you've had so far, nearly 50% of them were found kind of to be wrong, if you like. So what's the acceptable percentage of those?
I should just say that that there are numbers of reasons as to kind of why a challenge might be successful to a piece, and it could be because there's a kind of error made by the civil enforcement officer, which can happen from time to time, but also it can be kind of extenuating circumstances. It could be somebody saying that actually they've had a kind of medical episode, or that there was a kind of event, something that kind of happened that kind of caught them unaware, or a whole host of reasons. So I think in terms of kind of first-time appeals, I think NSL will be a lot more kind of lenient. Where we have serial the same kind of people appealing over and over again, then obviously unless they've got a good kind of reason to do that. So what I was kind of showing were kind of extracts from the current or our first annual parking report, but we may well find that as the service kind of goes on that those figures are quite different. The other point I should make is that, again, in those kind of early days, because we were operating the service from scratch, we were operating, the kind of start when the lockdown restrictions were eased. Again, we were a lot more kind of lenient in terms of kind of appeals. So, so it doesn't necessarily mean, that there was kind of mistake or anything made there.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I'd be remiss to mention that you said that we've got 6+1 CEOs at the moment, Rob. So yeah, 6+1 as in 6 currently and 1 on hire. Yeah, is that right?
No, we've got 5 CEOs in post, and we've got 1 vacant post.
Okay, so 5+1. What's happening with them? Will they be 2P'd across, or are they going to stay within Basingstoke's contractual remit and carry on with sort of other areas?
So the service that we're talking about at the moment is the on-street service, and that's what we're returning to HCC's control. That means we will still be responsible for all our car park areas, so we will still need to maintain a number of CEOs for that purpose. We're currently drafting a report and looking at the models about how many we require to fulfil that purpose. And I've got no plans at this point in time to tube any staff across. But I'll say that number is yet to be determined.
So there is a potential for that to go down, though?
There's a potential for it to go down, there's a potential for it to go up. CEOs are not quite unique, but almost unique in that they generate an income from their activities. So they do pay for themselves, if you like. That, not like myself, who is just a salaried member of staff. So the economics of it are not immediately transparent.
Thank you very much.
I've not seen any further hands. Last chance for everyone. No? In that case, thank you very much for coming to speak to us. We've really appreciated that presentation and the update, and we shall see as the changes take place. Brilliant. We'll just have a short change around of team if people are going to come up. And then we'll move on to item number 6, the potential future aquadrome facility mix. Wonderful. So before us, we have a paper on the potential future aquadrome facility mix. So first I'll invite Councillor Bean to introduce the paper, and then we'll hand over to officers for a short, kind of slightly more detailed technical introduction as well. Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Chair. So before you this evening is an update paper on the future of the aquadrome facility, including the likely mix, delivery model, options appraisal in terms of is it new build versus refurb, and options for future service delivery. We're keen to hear your views on the proposed options within the paper, and also, I guess, from my perspective, just to take this opportunity to kind of reaffirm our commitment to delivering a leisure centre that residents want to use for many years to come. We've had great success with the aquadrome. I think Mike may keep me straight on this, but at the point of opening, something around the tune of 1.1 million visitors per year. I think even more recently, still up at 900,000, even with the facility obviously being 20 plus years older. I equally think it's important as we move forward with a new facility that we take forward any learnings that we have from the existing facility and contractual arrangement. Just in terms of the content of the report, just to clarify that there's no decision around if we go with the option of a new build somewhere else on the leisure park, where that might be. So if anyone has that question, there is no answer at this point to that. And I guess in terms of the next major milestones is the detailed business case, which obviously is highlighted in the paper. That's it from me.
Thank you. Just in terms of introducing the briefing note, I'm Kate Dean, I'm the lead officer on the project, but I've got with me James Mercer, who is the report author, and we've also got Damien Adams from FMG, who supported us in terms of giving us their professional advice on what was an appropriate facility mix that would meet resident need and also be financially viable. It is a summary of a moment in time, and the advice was procured at the start of the year. That was pre the end of COVID restrictions and also increase in energy costs. I think both of those have had an impact on the leisure sectors as a whole, and because we have reached a procurement threshold with FMG, we have procured a new advisory team who will be working with officers to develop the detailed business case. I have no more to say on that other than just to really emphasise that we will continue throughout the business case development to check the proposed facility mix and also the proposed operating model. James.
Thank you, Kate. So just to follow up on that, really. So since October last year, we've been looking at opportunities to improve the existing aquadrome. And as Kate mentioned, in October, November last year, we appointed a series of consultants, including Damien here at FMG. And they have advised on the potential appropriate facilities mix for a new aquadrome or refurbished facility. And they've also provided advice on the potential delivery model for that aquadrome. As I say, it should be borne in mind that that advice was provided back in sort of the early part of this year. It was pre-COVID restrictions being fully lifted, as well as the sort of the heights of the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis. So it's a constantly sort of moving horizon. So in terms of the proposed facility mix, as is set out in the paper, the proposals that we're looking at the moment comprise an 8-lane, 25-metre competition pool, a 4-lane teaching pool. One of the options includes a replacement of the leisure waters with the water slides, as well as a 150 station gymnasium, a series of different studios for exercise classes, as well as the potential for a thermal spa with up to 3 hot and cold treatments, soft play area, clip and climb facility, and a new cafe. One of the points I would raise is that in terms of the water provision, the facilities that are being suggested would comply with the current leisure and recreation needs assessment. So that ensures that there is sufficient water area and swimming facilities going forward into the future. Now, part of the work that was undertaken was also to look at whether or not it would be appropriate to develop a new facility or a back-to-frame refurbishment. The benefits of a new facility would be that it could incorporate new technologies and also provide greater energy efficiency. It would also have the potential to provide a more prominent location for a new aquadrome, as well as ensure that there was a continuity of service. So while the new aquadrome is being constructed, the existing facility will continue in operation, and then there'll be a changeover at the end. Work has also been undertaken to look at the delivery model. This is considered a traditional design and build with a separate operate and maintain model. We've also looked at the potential for something that's referred to as a DBOM, which is a design, build, operate and maintain. And what that looks to do is to combine the construction and the future operation into one contract to try and ensure that it's run more efficiently and sort of can sort of provide a better facility for the operator. And for the residents of Basingstoke, of course. The proposal was taken to Cabinet briefing a number of months ago, and the consideration was given that we should be looking at a new build option within a new location within the leisure park, and that we should possibly be looking at the DBOM approach subject to further market testing. And in that respect, we are currently progressing a detailed business case which looks at that option along with other possible proposals, and that will be prepared and ready for review by Cabinet sort of towards the beginning of 2023. Yeah, that sort of covers a brief summary, really.
Lovely, thank you all. I should also point out we've also got Mike here with us. He's more of an expert on the delivery side of things, so once it's actually up and running, so that's why Mike is here, I believe. So that you should have a whole team to cover your questions. We are being asked specifically for feedback on the leisure mix, but also this starting point for the business case. So that's the design, build, operate model. If I can ask you to focus on questions first, and then we'll do comments afterwards. It just helps with summing up and the minutes quite a lot. Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much. Puts a little boot in my the strategy that I was going to approach, but that's fine. I'll let you off, you are the chair. So I'll go with all the questions then that I've got. Is so the design, the DBOM method, I think I understand it. How do we ensure that we don't go down the same path that we have? Well, firstly, who would own the building at that point? Would it still be Basingstoke and Dean? Would we own the building? And if we own the building, but somebody else is maintaining it, how do we avoid going down the position that we did with, similar to the ice rink, where it was left to fall into disrepair, and we've had a number of issues with that over the recent few years. I'll just quickly fire out all the questions. How can, in the report it says that the viability wasn't demonstrated around more than just it being a kind of centre of excellence for the south. can I understand how that viability was assessed? Was it based on the survey, considering we only had a small number of responses from across the borough? How did viability get demonstrated? It also mentions about 50-metre pools, that there wasn't a need for a 50-metre pool because that there is significant, or there's enough in the region to accommodate. Can I ask the question as to where they are? Because I've had a look online and there isn't anything in the immediate locality that would spring to mind. Aldershot being the nearest. There's a military pool. It's only open at certain times to the public. Guildford is another one, not really in Hampshire. And that is all I have at the moment. The rest was more of comments. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start off if that's okay. All good questions. Hopefully I've noted them down okay. In terms of the first one, the council would still own the building. So there's no issues there around transfer of ownership. They are designing and building it for you and then running it for you, but it would have, at the end of the contract, the building would come back to the council in a normal way. The second question around how you avoid, if you go down that route, the issues around them not repairing it, replacing it, etc. I guess in reality that's down to a contract management thing and a well-written specification and contract. So normally in these contracts there'll be lots of detailed repair and replacement requirements in there, and then if the model is done properly by the bidder, that is costed in by the bidder so that you know at what point during the contract they are investing into the facility to keep it in a good condition as you would expect, and then it's the council's responsibility to continue to maintain it, because it's not like you've just given them a lease and said, this is your land, you build it and then you run it. It's still your building. You still have regular monthly, quarterly contract meetings for monitoring. And that would be the process by which you hold them to the specification and hold them to their proposals. So there's always that risk, but that's how you use good contract management to mitigate that risk. In terms of the third point, I guess I'm not sure about we can come back to what you quite mean by centre of excellence, but what we did in terms of, I'll come at it in terms of what we did to define what the facility mix should be. So we looked at, one, your leisure recreation needs assessment, so the strategy work you have done to understand what facilities are required in the area. And then we overlaid some of our analysis on different drive time basis for different types of facilities to understand what competing facilities they were compared to the number and type of people who live in a catchment area, and therefore whether all of the different requirements were catered for in certain different facility type areas. And then based on that, we came to a conclusion of, you need this much swimming pool water, for example, or you need this type of health and fitness facility. So it's more based on the supply and demand analysis. There was then a separate public consultation process through the master plan, but I think, as you alluded to, it maybe didn't have lots and lots of responses. So the majority of the how do we come to the facility mix is driven through that statistical analysis. What else is there? What gaps are there in their provision? What do we need to provide to meet both now the requirement, but also how the population might grow in the future? So looking at future population projections and to make sure we've got the right facilities for the right people. I'll just cover off your next point, and then if you want to come back in with extra questions. The final point was around 50-metre pools. So I think you're broadly right. There's Winchester, Portsmouth, Aldershot and Guildford, I think, are probably your four closest. So it's important to say on that one that the evidence base comes from something called the Sport England Facility Planning Model. So that's a national model that Sport England provide that actually says how much water space do you need in specific areas based on the water space that is in other areas surrounding it. So it doesn't just look at your area on its own, it looks at the wider picture and all of the surrounding local authorities and say how much water space do you require. And that doesn't identify a need for a 50-metre pool in terms of additional water space required. Obviously, in terms of competition, there are those additional facilities as well, which aren't that immediately close, but they're all within a catchment, I suppose, because people will drive further for a 50-metre pool if they require one. So that's the basis on which the 50-metre pool conclusions come to. And it's quite important then, if you were to think about if you decided you wanted to deliver a 50-metre pool, and perhaps you went to Sport England or somebody later and said, we'd like some funding, they would say, well, your analysis doesn't say that a 50-metre pool is required. So it's a harder case to make for funding, for example. So it's quite important to use that evidence base and overlay that with public consultation and other things as well to come to the conclusions over the right facility mix. Hopefully that helps, but happy to take any further questions following up.
It does and it doesn't, because we clearly state on the report that demand is high, especially during peak hours, and yet the only addition that we're adding to this is some spas, a coffee shop. You know, the water provision is exactly the same as what we've got there now. It's not an improvement. We've got a 25-metre pool, we've got a 20-metre pool, we've got a leisure facility with log flumes. What else? You know, the gym itself is only 30 stations more than what is currently there. So there isn't much extra that's going to be provided in terms of facilities.
Just on the water space, as I said, the supply and demand doesn't identify that there is a need for particularly much more, but we are actually moving from a 6-lane to an 8-lane pool, so there is an increase in water provision. So there's that from a statistical side. Also, there's the increase in kind of the quality of what's provided and the layout and the modern design, especially when you come onto, for example, the leisure pool and the leisure water, and providing something that is perhaps more fit for purpose in terms of modern expectations of what people require from those sorts of areas.
I think just one thing to also add about the gym station number is that the evidence that's starting to emerge, I suppose, is there's a return to sort of relatively normal conditions, is that gym membership is not returning to pre-COVID levels. There seems to be about a return to sort of 75 to 80% usage. So we will continue to monitor that as we develop the business case.
Can I come back in?
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for a very interesting discussion there. I'm looking at the DBOM and I'm just intrigued. Well, I'm wondering how much detail you're going to cover to demonstrate that it's the most cost-effective solution. There are temptations commonly in the design to keep the costs down on material. You then pay for it later on in life during the operate and maintain. That's one. Second is the reuse of the old aquadrome and what's going to happen to it. It's quite common these days to take all the rubble, break it up and reuse it in a new building. But here, of course, you are constructing a new aquadrome in parallel to the old one being decommissioned. So what's going to happen to the material? That's my questions. Thank you.
We haven't made any decisions on those. That will be considered as part of the development of the full business case. This paper is an outline business case and we'll be following the Green Book business case model on this one. So those are all of the things that we'll pick up as the business case gets developed.
Just on the specific point about the DBOM that you made, that's actually theoretically one of the chief benefits of the DBOM, because the team that is building the facility is also then operating it. So if they don't build it to the right standards, their operating costs will be higher in the longer term. Whereas if you separate the two out, you have a bit of a mismatch there where sometimes it's built to one standard and an operator comes in and says, oh, I wouldn't have done it like that, I would have built it differently or used different materials, which would have helped me lower the operating costs for the council. So that is theoretically one of the chief benefits of that approach.
That's true about the use of the word theoretical, but I've seen too many examples in the past where that has not proved to be the case. So I'll just leave that as a comment.
Thank you. Councillor Tuck.
Oh, thank you. You've made me think of something, which is, since the aquadrome was created, which I don't know, what was that, 20 years ago, our population has increased significantly. It's also set to increase significantly again. And I'm feeling a bit more worried now that 2 more lanes in the swimming pool is just not going to be enough, especially, let's say, for an ageing population where one might be inclined to swim a little more. And also, I don't know the figures on how many more gym things. Gym stuff I'm not so worried about. Other facilities can be brought in more easily, but swimming pools are not easy to construct, and they have to be there for quite a significant lifetime, I think, for a payback, etc. What are your thoughts? Have you taken sufficient account of the population increase with your increase in provision of 2 lanes in a pool?
Yes. Damien alluded earlier on to the supply and demand, and that also reflects to what's called the leisure recreational needs assessment, and that is a large chunk of that is a desktop-based exercise looking at population growth right up to 2040 and beyond, and so part of the local plan projections going forward. So we do try and anticipate that demand going forward as well, so that the decision made about investment isn't about the now. It's about, are we fit for purpose for the next 10, 20, 30 years in anticipation of any growth that has been identified within the borough. So, yeah. So the answer is yes. There is a, if you like, a calculation that's done as part of what's called the leisure recreational needs assessment, which informs the part of the recommendations as well today.
Okay, so there's no further anticipated usage, as in we're not going to all get a bit fitter or increase in usage. You know, I mean, habits change, and you know, it's that as well. I mean, I hear what you're saying about population. Thank you.
Sorry, do you want me to just come back? We're very conscious that leisure can be very much a trend-based thing, where things are in and then they're out the next day. What we have seen with swimming provision in particular is that that satisfies a core need in terms of resident health and well-being and populace and so on, and continues to draw people to come in to learn what's a basic life skill in terms of being able to swim and so on. So I think we'll find that swimming seems to be a relative constant throughout the whole process, whereas there are some dry side type activities that may come and go that you might see, such as the trampoline parks and so on, which at the moment are very popular. So it's important that the facility mix tries to ride out these trends and provide something that for now is fit for purpose, but is also flexible enough to deal with any trends that emerge in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Connor.
Thanks. Sorry to labour the point about the pool. I'll make that comment later about what I think about that. But mine's a more technical question. I'm hoping it's because it's too granular for the report. If it is the new build, will it be powered by its own solar technologies?
I think certainly sustainability in design will be a major consideration. I can't say at this stage what sustainable features we will incorporate, but that will be certainly a significant part of the specification.
The only thing I'd say to add to that is that solar wouldn't entirely power a facility of that size, but it would normally be part of the mix. As Kate says, there's a mix of different energy efficiency packages you can put in to make sure the building optimises its energy performance. And solar is normally one of many different parts of having a sustainable building.
Accept it. It's just that it's used as one of the arguments against the 50-metre pool is that to do with the energy use. So to my mind, especially with the battery technology now that's coming in, which is cheaper and more powerful, I think there is a stronger case for a bigger or a larger proportion of the energy to be generated by its own solar panels, if you like.
I mean, we haven't got the architects here, unfortunately, so they could really get into the technical detail of that with you. But a larger pool is definitely going to require more energy use, and that will have a significant cost. I do agree with you that the more you can put in terms of sustainability will help to offset that. But almost every time, the larger pool will still have a greater energy cost, and that's something we need to really bear in mind. One, in terms of the capital cost, because actually a larger pool is a bigger capital cost as well, but two, in terms of those running costs. because there's no doubt a 50-metre pool is more expensive to run. I was the contract manager for Crystal Palace National Sports Centre for a number of years, 50-metre pool, and incredibly expensive to run. I bite that, as you say, you have to do as much as you can in terms of energy efficiency to mitigate that.
Councillor Compton-Bennett.
Thank you. I'd like to know, please, how does the demand prediction reflect our aspirations in the Healthy Communities objective and also NHS county policy of making people healthier and encouraging them to focus more on accessing, using health and wellbeing facilities? There's a massive change in how people are being encouraged to view their health. It's supposed to be to get healthier and not to go into the hospital at all. And also, many of the hospital rehab facilities are coming out into the community. So again, that's additional demand. And have we had a really good look at NHS policy and how, and if so, how we're reflecting it here?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. It's a very relevant question, and it's becoming more of a burning issue going forward. I think there's a lot of overlap, a lot of shared agendas around that in the prevention and trying to help people become, have a better quality of life, especially as they get older. And the truth is you can't avoid the fact that you have to invest in that in order to enjoy that. I think one of the key strands for this new build has been about affordability and about accessibility, and that can come in different forms, whether it's a pricing concern, whether it's a physical concern, or whether it's about the programme and the different types of activities that could be provided. And part of that programme could be about partnership working with agencies like in the health sector. One of the things we noticed about flexible space, we talked about that earlier on, is to try and allow space that can be used for different purposes by different agencies for whatever their needs are. So the more flexible that space can be, the better chance we have of engineering those sorts of partnership arrangements. So, and I think it's a leap of faith by both parties to engage in that, but it'd be something that I'm sure would be very welcome if we could, if you like, be supportive of that approach and engage with that. Because I think traditionally more and more leisure centres are now called health centres or wellbeing centres, to try and get away from you have to be a sports person or that type of led person to go into them, and try and break down some of those barriers to say, no, it's a hub site, this is a community-orientated facility, that you can do a number of different things, and you don't have to be sporty to do them. So I think it's just trying to get those positive messages out there in whatever context or whatever form of building we're able to emerge with.
Can I add to that? Is that okay, or would you like to come back? I mean, Mike's 100% right, but one thing I would say is, a lot of it comes down to, if you're externalising the management, the kind of operating contract you put in place. So a modern contract at the moment focuses, as you exactly say, much more on health and well-being and physical activity rather than just sport, if you like. And it also focuses on moving outside the four walls of a leisure facility and how can the operator get out into the community and help people be physically active in other settings. So if that's the kind of route you want to go down, in your specification for whoever was running it, you would put in greater responsibilities around getting into the community and doing health work with people who, let's be honest, there's a certain proportion of the population who will probably never come to a leisure centre for a variety of different reasons. So actually, how do we get out to them and offer them services within their community and where they feel comfortable? So a lot of it comes down to what you require from your operator in that specification, I would say, to deliver a lot of what you're saying, because that is 100% the agenda nowadays, rather than just let's do things in our four walls, let's concentrate on sport. It's much wider.
So can I just come back? So with that in mind, do we possibly need to revisit the size of pool that we're thinking about, particularly because, sitting on the Basingstoke and Dean Leisure Trust Board, we often talk about the pressure on the pool at the moment in terms of the number of kids that want to have swimming lessons, and we're struggling to deal with it now. And a lot of it also is, people are often put off. They've heard that there's not much space there, so they don't bother going. So actually, we might not have a fair reflection of current demand now. And I think there's probably a very good case, especially since we didn't get that many responses to the consultation because it was COVID and all the rest of it. I think there's probably a good case for going back out and having a really good look at everything we need, because we only get one shot at it, and it would be fantastic to do it right.
I might make a note of that as a comment, Councillor. You're nearly at comments, all right? Nearly at comments. I've got one sneaky question, then I've got Councillor Lee, and then I think everyone's asked. Oh no, and Councillor Williams. Well, if you keep asking more questions, you won't be allowed comments. Oh, you on comments? Sorry. Oh, maybe I got green jumpers confused. Sorry. They're quite different colours. I don't know how. So a complementary question, I think, on the health side of things was, is there any need identified for an accessible hydrotherapy pool, and was that considered as part of the facilities mix at all?
It didn't come up as part of our research that there was a particular need for it. It's not a core part of most leisure centres you see, and we haven't come across any local research that says it is, but if local consultation was to, evidence that it was required, I guess you could look at it, but it's not something that came up as part of our market research in terms of a requirement. They are often areas that you can provide, because it provides a lot of good activity, but are quite expensive again because of the running costs associated with them. So unless there's an acute need that everybody's saying there are none around that we can access, it probably wouldn't be something you'd look to put in unless that need is really identified.
Yeah, it's interesting. Last year we visited Winchester, and they've got a separate wing where they have a hydrotherapy section, but that's closely connected to Winchester University and the physiotherapy teams and courses that they run. So they had a vested interest and contributed to the cost of putting one in. So it became an integral part of their course management. So I think it just backs up what Damien's saying about, on its own, it's not something that is a bona fide or consideration as part of the facility mix. But I do know that hydrotherapy pools in hospitals, for example, are particularly short in supply, and there's a lot of demand for those. So I guess it's a case of trying to establish what is the provision in Basingstoke, and what are the plans in the future, and whether or not, as you said, this provides the opportunity to revisit that question. But as a rule, I agree with Damien that it's not something that would be part and parcel of a normal mix.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
I want to focus my initial questions on the local recreational needs assessment. Can you clarify whether it's based on the existing one, or, as I understand it, the local residential needs assessment that's in draft form and is about to come to this committee at any time soon? I think that's important. In relation to the facility mix, you looked at 3G pitches, but concluded it wasn't needed or viable. Have you taken full account of the developing local needs, local recreational needs assessment, which I understand identifies that the borough is four full-size football pitches short of future need?
Councillor Williams is correct in saying that we do have a paper that's coming to CEP shortly, which talks about reflections on the new LRNA that's just been completed in the summer. And he is correct that he touches upon other sports facilities as well. And the plan is to bring it to CEP for further discussion. So I appreciate we can't really answer that tonight, but I think it is coming up, and then we'll probably be able to have a more wider conversation about some of the other elements of infrastructure that's been questioned.
So presumably that does mean that the initial work was done on the existing approved LNRA.
Yeah, it was an update effectively. So it carried out the same methodology as the one that was originally done back in 2014-15. So the same methodology was applied, and it will be an update of that to help us for the next 10 years. Yeah.
I think that reinforces the point about looking at this in the round at well-being, looking at it afresh, because there's some issues, I think, about the number of strategies that the council has. Do they all pull together? Do they all go in the same direction? And I think it is premature, as Councillor Compton-Burnett said, you only get one shot at this. This is a big, big issue, and I think that we need to look at it in the round. And I'm not sure why the viability of 3G pitches was dismissed, but in terms of a well-being approach, that would make real sense to actually incorporate that in a wider view.
Wrong button. Councillor Mackay.
Right button this time for me. I just wondered, is there an opportunity to look at heat balance across the pool provision and the ice rink? Obviously one requires heat and one wants to lose heat.
I mean, yes, there are. If you're talking about a new facility where we looked at the option of having two, an ice rink and a pool, or you're talking about utilising the existing?
I'm just focusing on the pool at the moment and asking whether in the development there is an opportunity to look at heat balance with the existing ice rink. I'm not trying to broaden the conversation into the future of the ice rink.
I think that the ice rink will stay in its current location, and the likelihood is that the pool will be in a different location from where it is at the moment. So I don't know whether that's possible, but we'll certainly build that into part of the design development.
Yeah, in which case I'll turn my question into comment and ask that you do. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Compton-Burnett, do you have another question?
I have a question, yes. I found it very difficult, it's becoming a question, I found it very difficult to look at the facility mix for the Aquadrome in isolation from the rest of the leisure park. Because to me, the whole thing, you know, just as Councillor Mackay's point's just been made about using the heat, the whole thing comes together. The climbing wall, for example, it might be better in one of the other facilities in the leisure park. We've talked quite a lot about flexibility and the importance of being able to move with the times. And I certainly think that we should look at the whole thing. And at our last CEP meeting, we asked whether we could have a workshop, and that seemed, everyone agreed that would be a good idea. So my question is, please may we have a workshop that looks at the leisure facility as a whole?
Yes, we can arrange that. I think the only things to think about is that the Aquadrome is intended to still be council owned and funded, so we have certainty of delivery around it. The other facilities are going to be delivered by private sector operators, over which we don't have the same level of control.
Right, I just have Councillor Lee down as one more question. Have you got a further question as well, Councillor Williams, after? Or are you on to comments?
I've got a question.
Fine. Councillor Lee first.
Thank you, Chair. So just based on some of the information that we've gleaned tonight, that it was based on the current needs assessment, what scope do we have to pause the business case that's going forward at the moment, considering it's not meeting anything that we think that it will need in the future? I just think it's crazy that we're making a lot of effort to look at a model that might not be reflective of what we actually need. And if we end up doing a workshop, which I hope we do, isn't going to meet our designs or plans there. So can we look at what options we have to pausing?
And in terms of the time involved to develop the business case through to its final stage, it's quite significant, and we are looking at profiling that programme at the moment, and I would expect that there will be opportunity to have recognition of more of the update of that study rather than where we were at the beginning of the year. So the expectation is that we will have a programme that enables us to do that, but doesn't necessarily cause for a pause at the moment.
Councillor Williams.
I'm mindful of Councillor Bean's introduction and says there isn't a clear location. But can I ask for clarification about the thinking around the word more prominent position? What does that mean in practical terms? Are we thinking that we're going to use the area that's leased to Hampshire County Council? Are we thinking that it's going to attract people by being more visible? What's the driver behind the more prominent?
We have an all-member briefing on the Leisure Park Master Plan next week, which hopefully you will all be able to come along to. We've used a firm of architects called BDP on that, and they've given quite a lot of consideration to not only things like visibility, but the physical site constraints, things like the slope of the site and general topography, and they have, as part of that exercise, identified a site that, in their view, sort of optimises all of those considerations, and it's not on the land next to Milestones, but hopefully it's something that we can discuss in a bit more detail at next week's briefing.
Lovely. Has everyone asked all their questions? Perfect. In that case, I'm going to tell you which comments people have managed to sneak in already. So then you don't have to repeat them, unless I've missed them. So we've discussed some concerns regarding the benefits of the DBOM approach and how that doesn't always result in reduced running costs. We've expressed the need to really consider the health needs of the borough, both now and in the future, and to work with the NHS on that. A request to consider a possibility of heat balance between a new pool and the existing ice rink, and a request for a workshop on the leisure mix across the leisure park, but also including the aquadrome. Councillor Jeans.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to direct a comment at Councillor Lee, actually, because I think he's being a little harsh to say that the points that we have at the front of us this evening don't meet a need. Actually, I feel that what we see at the front of us meets many needs, and we need to be considerate that, you know, there's an ideal world and then there's reality, and we should consider not only what we would all like to pick from a cherry tree, but also actually what we can deliver and what's of best value to our residents here. Thank you.
Chair, can I have a point of clarification on that, please?
I'm not sure that's in the Constitution, but I will allow it, yes.
My point is that the needs assessment is of yonder year, and we've not looked at the future as to what that is. A growing town, a growing borough, clubs that are currently training late into the night to deliver their training. We're not looking at that. I know from experience watching ice hockey that there are clubs training gone midnight because of an under provision in the borough. So I think there is scope to deliver something a lot better than what we have based on future needs as we go forward.
Can I just come in on this point, because it feels like we've laboured over this for a period of time, and having had the portfolio previously, although it doesn't strictly fall within the new portfolio as resident services, I think there probably is a point around where we've arrived at now and the updated LRNA, and is there anything within that that deems that we should be delivering something materially different to what we're proposing with the aquadrome now? My gut feel is that's probably not the case, but the aquadrome is not the exhaustive answer to whatever need is identified in that LRNA. So if there's a requirement for 4 3G pitches, it doesn't need to be at the leisure park. So there will be a process within which we will go through in terms of what does the LRNA say, what are the actions that we identify that we need to take to meet the needs assessment. So I think there is a point around that updated assessment. Does that materially move where we've arrived at in terms of facility mix? I don't think it does. As far as I'm aware, particularly around the swimming, I think that we're quite confident around that it can meet the needs of whatever those projections are, and I think we can clarify how that calculation is done. But I don't believe that that will move us materially where we're from in terms of the aquadrome, but there is a conversation to be had separately around what needs have been identified and what the mechanisms might be available to us to meet some of that demand, if you like. But I don't think the aquadrome is the exhaustive answer to everything that's in that needs assessment.
Thank you.
I think it's the accessibility of the leisure park that is a key issue in terms of trying to make sure that we're providing good facilities that are within close travelling distance for people.
Councillor Lee, did you have another comment to make?
Well, yeah, I did. I kind of just wanted to give my comments on the whole report, and I appreciate, it was written a few months ago, put together post-COVID, and really kind of thank you for coming in to do this. My worry is that we're being very short-sighted just for the future of Basingstoke. Councillor Bean, you opened up by saying that it was a leisure park, but it's not. It's an aquadrome rebuild. What I'm worried is that we're focusing in on little areas, and I get that it's because it's council owned and that we can do that, but nothing's tying the whole piece together. What I feel we need is a leisure park that brings people in. I mean, at the last meeting, we spoke about a centre of excellence for the south that will draw people from further afield to come here, visit Basingstoke, spend their money, whether that be swimming, bowling, whether that be laser tag, pitch and putt, you name it. I think we can be that area for the south. It may feel like cherry picking, and that it might not deliver value for our residents, nor does a hotel, but that's by the by. What we're going to end up with is buildings of various different states of repair. So the ice rink, as an example, we're not too sure on the outcome of that. Obviously, I've posed some questions. We're waiting to find out that. That's going to be in one condition. The aquadrome will be in a different condition. The new facility in a different condition, and people wanted an upgraded leisure park rather than just little tidbits done here and there. And I will say that as a veteran of the British Army, we did have a say in the forces around 7Ps. I'll keep it to 6 because I can't say one of them, and that is that poor performance, let me get it right. Prior preparation and planning prevents poor performance. And what we're doing here really seems like a lack of planning and will lead to a lack of poor performance.
Thank you.
Sorry, but I think the reality in terms of the wider leisure park regen, which obviously is Councillor Reiser, is you would never be able to approach that in terms of big bang. It would always have to be incremental build out of facilities. And I just to kind of labour the point back with the aquadrome as well, we do also have to remember that we have a significantly ageing facility which has year on year seems to be increasing in terms of capital costs. So from my perspective, there is also an urgency in the sense of the actual facility itself, the degradation, and therefore more of an urgent need to build a replacement facility that residents can use rather than at the moment trying to stick lots of sticky plasters on the aquadrome to keep it going. I think there is a more urgent need to deliver a new aquadrome facility because it is coming towards the end of its life.
I think the impression I'm getting as chair is that there is a lot of passion in this room to get get this right, and I would agree with that. I think probably the most constructive way forward is to pursue this request for a workshop, because then we've got a structured area where we can look at lots of different things. This is literally just a briefing note on the aquadrome, so I think if we can accept that as a committee, that's where we are and where we'd like to go, then hopefully that will be a very constructive way forward. Councillor Lee, did you want to comment?
Well, yeah, I agree. Ultimately, having a workshop would benefit, but I just sort of come back on that statement is that at the moment people are coming to the aquadrome anyway. We've already said that the numbers are high and remain high, so leaving it as it is for the time being isn't putting people off. What we want to do is encourage more people there by having a better facility. By just replacing it like for like and adding 2 swimming lanes isn't going to encourage more people to come there, and it's not going to solve the problem of, clubs late at night. If I take my children there, I can't go in the big pool because there's a club there. We're looking for the future, not just the status quo.
Thank you. I think that's been noted. Councillor Morrow.
I'm going to sound a bit pessimistic, I think, because I kind of feel similarly in the current climate, to get past a consultancy would be something to celebrate. We have got an old facility and we need to get on and replace it, so we do have somewhere to swim. That's one comment. My main comment is the fact that we've declared a climate emergency. This is a building that's hopefully going to last 20 years. We're going to be approaching 2050. So I would be hoping for a building that has, really at its heart, energy efficiency. Because if it's lasting towards 2050, then we should be looking for the top, stuff. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm supportive of the idea of a new build, and of course that implies there'll be a demolition of the existing building, and I just wanted to share a small experience of managing a large demolition contract not that long ago, and we were able to set a KPI of 95% recycling rate on the demolition aspect of the job. And I would just ask that you look to set a KPI around the recycling rate of that sort of order, and make that part of the contract with whoever does the demolition, because the materials can be recovered and can go elsewhere to be reused. They don't need to be used on the same site. Thank you.
Lovely. Any more comments? Oh, Councillor Compton-Bennett.
Thank you. I think it would be really helpful if we could have a look at the LRNA and also actually the FMG report in advance of the workshop, because then it would mean that we knew where you were coming from, because you've obviously done some fantastic work, and it would be great to build on that. And also it would be very helpful to have an assurance that the workshop will be where we are actually listened to. It won't be, somebody telling us this is what we're going to do. We'd all love to do our very best for this. So please can we have an assurance that we'll all be able to contribute, and that our contributions will actually make a difference.
I don't think that's something I can promise you as chair, but I can promise you to talk to both relevant portfolio holders about the desire, and I think it's been very clear how strongly CEP feel about it, which I think is really positive. This is what we're here for. Lovely. Any further comments? Right, okay, I've got my work cut out for me now. I've been scribbling away. I know, but I like to be nice. So, right, I will repeat the ones I've already said, but concerns were discussed regarding the benefits of the D-bond model and how this doesn't always result in reduced running costs. There was a passionate need to really consider the health needs of the borough and the leisure needs of the borough, both now and in the future. a request to consider the possibility of heat balance between a new pool and the existing ice rink, which links, I think, to the need to build in energy efficiency to a high quality to meet climate change targets. There's a very strong request for a workshop on the leisure mix across the leisure park and in the aquadrome. But with that, committee have noted that we do need a balance between what's wanted and what's needed, and a workshop would be a constructive way to discuss that, especially in light of the updated LNRA. And there was also an urgency noted to replace the aquadrome because of the state the current building is in. So that's all got to be balanced in and to be discussed at that workshop. The aquadrome needs to be easily accessible to people travelling into it, and also a request to consider a KPI regarding the recycling rate of the old building, and a 95% target was given as an example. I've missed something. Sorry, Councillor Connor.
Sorry, Chair, I'm being pedantic. Can we, at the top of that piece, you mentioned health. Could you add health and well-being, please?
I absolutely can, yes. Everyone's almost smiling at me, so I'm going to call that a win. Lovely. Thank you all for that. That was a really helpful and constructive session. Thank you also, officers, for your time and your questions, and Councillor Bean. Right, so that brings us now to our last proper item, which is the Community Environment and Partnerships Work Programme. So, hang on, I've lost my bit of paper with it on. At the moment, it's looking a little empty, but there is quite a lot that's kind of in the pipeline to be scheduled. So there's also going to be another chairs meeting where they'll discuss what goes to what committee. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lee.
Sorry, well, I was just going to see if about raising your awareness of an item to add. So I'm, as a father of a disabled child, I've been in talks with Scope today about their Let's Play Fair campaign. I was just wondering whether we can have a discussion, a report on the disabled access and inclusive parks that were within the borough, so that we can see whether we meet their kind of requirements and how we can further improve that for our residents.
As an occupational therapist who works with young disabled people, I'm not going to say no to that. Would you mind filling out a form just so we get the correct points across and we don't miss anything? But yeah, absolutely. We've mentioned already that we're expecting the LRNA, which isn't on the list currently, but we will make sure that's added to it. And I believe Councillor Mamoleni is hoping to see an EDI update as well. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair. That used to be there when Councillor Walks was chairing that meeting. We had extensive list there. One of them was EDI update. Recently that disappeared from this list, so I'd like to see that one, please.
Lovely, I will follow that up. And two other members have already put forms in, which also aren't on this list, so we're chasing that as well. So I think we shall be quite busy. Is there anything else anyone would like to flag? Yes, Councillor Compton-Bennett.
Thank you. We raised a number of things that we wanted to discuss at our last meeting, and they're actually on the last page of the minutes that we agreed just now. It would be fantastic if we could just quickly run through them and find out when we're going to talk about them, please.
Right, so I think, Councillor Compton-Bennett, this is probably something we're going to need to run through with Democratic Services and get that scheduled in. But I'll try and get you an update before the next meeting, if that's all right. Because I'm not off the top of my head. I'm good, but I don't know where everything is on that list. So perfect. We will follow that up together. So that probably leaves me in that to close the meeting and to wish you well for the November meeting, because I don't think I'm going to be here, as I will have some slightly more urgent priorities at the time. But I wish you well. I will be back, and I shall miss you. Thank you.